Emma Rodriguez pressed her small face against the cold glass of the school bus window, her breath creating tiny fog patches that she quickly wiped away with her sleeve. The excitement bubbling in her 8-year-old chest felt like butterflies doing somersaults. Today wasn't just any ordinary Tuesday in Manchester. Today was the day she would finally see the Queen. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had spent weeks preparing the class for this moment. They had learned about royal protocols, practiced their curtsies and bows, and memorized interesting fact about Queen Elizabeth II. Emma had been particularly fascinated by the story of how the Queen had once hidden under a table during World War II air raids, just like any other little girl might do when scared. The morning had started with unusual chaos in the Rodriguez household. Emma's mother, Maria, had laid out her daughter's best dress the night before, a navy blue frock with tiny white flowers that her grandmother had sent from Spain. It was the most beautiful dress Emma owned, and she had been saving it for the most special occasion she could imagine. What could be more special than meeting the Queen of England? Emma's father, Carlos, worked double shifts at the local factory to support his family. He had immigrated to England 5 years ago with dreams of giving his daughter opportunities he never had growing up in rural Mexico. When Emma had burst into their small flat 3 weeks ago, waving the permission slip for the royal visit, Carlos had signed it immediately despite the small fee required. Some dreams, he believed, were worth every penny. The bus ride to the city center felt endless to Emma. She sat next to her best friend, Sophie Chun, who was equally excited but trying hard to appear sophisticated about the whole affair. Sophie's older brother had told her that seeing the Queen was no big deal because she was just another old lady in fancy clothes. But Sophie secretly hoped he was wrong. As the bus turned onto King Street, Emma could see crowds already gathering along the barriers. Police officers in their bright yellow jackets were directing pedestrians, and she could spot the distinctive red tunics and tall black hats of the Queen's Guard in the distance. Her heart began racing faster than when she ran laps during PE class. Mrs. Patterson stood up at the front of the bus, steadying herself with one hand on the seat while holding a clipboard in the other. She was a kind woman in her 50s who had been teaching for over 20 years, but even she seemed nervous about today's excursion. Right then, "Children," Mrs. Patterson called out, her voice carrying over the excited chatter. "Remember what we practiced? We stay together as a group. We listen to instructions from the police officers and security personnel. And most importantly, we remain calm and respectful. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, so let's make sure we represent our school with pride." Emma nodded solemnly, though inside she felt anything but calm. She had dreamed about this moment for weeks. In her dreams, the Queen would notice her in the crowd, smile directly at her, and maybe even wave. Emma had practiced her curtsy so many times in her bedroom that her mother had started teasing her about wearing holes in the carpet. The bus pulled up to their designated drop-off point, about 200 meters from where the Queen would be making her appearance. As the children filed off, Emma could hear the distant sound of crowds cheering and military bands warming up. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Their assigned viewing area was behind a set of metal barriers, positioned where they would have a clear view of the Queen's walkabout. Police community support officers helped organize the various school groups, ensuring younger children were placed at the front where they could see over the barriers without difficulty. Emma found herself in the second row, directly behind a group of 5-year-olds from a nearby primary school. She didn't mind being slightly further back. She was tall for her age and could see perfectly well. Besides, the excitement of simply being there was almost overwhelming. The security presence was impressive, but not intimidating. Metropolitan police officers patrolled the area with friendly smiles, occasionally stopping to chat with excited children or help parents lift little ones for better views. The Queen's Guard stood at attention at regular intervals, their red tunics immaculate, and their expression serious, but not unfriendly. One particular guard caught Emma's attention. He was younger than she expected, probably in his early 20s, with kind eyes that occasionally glanced toward the crowd of children with what looked like amusement. His name tag read Guardsman Williams, and Emma noticed that despite his serious military bearing, he seemed to be fighting back a smile when the 5-year-olds in front started singing a nursery rhyme about the Queen. "Look at his hat," Sophie whispered to Emma, pointing at Guardsman Williams. "It's so tall. Do you think his head gets hot in there?" Emma giggled, but quickly covered her mouth with her hand. She wanted to be respectful, even though the guard's tall bearskin hat did look rather warm for a spring day. As the morning progressed, more people gathered along the barriers. Families with small children, elderly couples with Union Jack flags, tourists with cameras, and local residents who had simply decided to take the day off work to witness history. The atmosphere was festive, but orderly, with everyone seeming to understand the special nature of the occasion. Emma's school group was positioned near several other schools, creating a sea of excited young faces all pressed against the barriers. Teachers moved among their students, offering water bottles, adjusting clothing, and taking photographs to commemorate the day. Emma's mother had given her a small disposable camera with strict instructions to take pictures of everything so they could create a scrapbook together. The first photograph Emma took was of the crowd itself. Hundreds of people of all ages, united in their desire to catch a glimpse of their monarch. The second was of Sophie, who was attempting to braid her hair while maintaining her position at the barrier. The third was a slightly blurry shot of Guardsman Williams, who happened to turn his head just as she pressed a shutter. As the time for the Queen's arrival approached, a subtle change came over the crowd. Conversations became quieter, cameras were prepared, and everyone seemed to stand a little straighter. Emma could feel her heartbeat in her ears, and she gripped the metal barrier so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The sound of approaching sirens and motorcycle escorts grew louder. Police officers spoke into their radios, and the Queen's Guard adjusted their positions slightly. Mrs. Patterson gathered her students closer together, reminding them once more about proper behavior and the importance of staying with the group. Emma checked her small purse to make sure her camera was easily accessible. She had written a letter to the Queen the night before, folded it carefully, and placed it in her pocket. She knew she probably wouldn't be able to give it to her, but having it there made her feel more prepared, as if she was carrying a piece of her hopes and dreams. The crowd's excitement reached a crescendo as the royal motorcade appeared in the distance. Emma stood on her tiptoes, her small hand shading her eyes from the spring sun as she tried to catch her first glimpse of the Queen of England. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for her entire young life. But in that moment of pure anticipation, Emma had no idea that her day was about to become far more memorable than she ever could have imagined, though not in the way she expected. Sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin with the simplest moments, and sometimes the most careful plans give way to the beautiful unpredictability of real life. As the motorcade drew closer and the crowd pressed forward with excitement, Emma clutched her camera tighter and whispered a small prayer of gratitude for this incredible opportunity. She was about to witness history, and she wanted to remember every single detail of this perfect day. The royal car was now visible, moving slowly and deliberately through the crowded streets of Manchester. Inside, Emma could just make out a familiar silhouette, the unmistakable profile of Queen Elizabeth II, elegant and composed, fulfilling her royal duties with the same grace she had shown for decades. Emma's eyes filled with tears of joy. This was really happening. She was really here. And in just a few minutes, she would be in the same space as the Queen of England, breathing the same air, sharing the same moment in time. The magic of the moment was about to begin, though it would unfold in ways that no one in that excited crowd could have predicted. Sometimes the best stories are the ones we never see coming. And sometimes the most meaningful encounters happen when we least expect them. As the royal motorcade continued its approach, Emma pressed closer to the barrier, her heart full of anticipation and wonder, completely unaware that she was about to become part of a story that would be remembered long after this beautiful spring day in Manchester had passed into history. The royal Bentley came to a graceful stop directly in front of Emma's section of the barrier, its deep burgundy paint gleaming in the afternoon sunlight. Emma could hardly believe her luck. Of all the hundreds of meters of barriers along the route, the Queen had chosen to begin her walkabout right where she was standing. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd as the cart door opened, and Queen Elizabeth II emerged with the practiced elegance of someone who had performed this ritual thousands of times before. She wore a bright turquoise coat that seemed to glow against the backdrop of Manchester's grey stone buildings, and her matching hat was adorned with a small cluster of spring flowers that caught the light beautifully. Emma had seen the Queen countless times on television and in photographs, but nothing had prepared her for the presence of the monarch in person. There was something almost magical about her bearing, a combination of regal dignity and genuine warmth that made everyone in the crowd feel as though they were witnessing something truly special. The Queen's first stop was at the section of barriers where the youngest children were gathered. Emma watched in wonder as Her Majesty bent down to speak with a little boy who couldn't have been more than 4 years old. The child had been crying just moments before, overwhelmed by the crowd and noise, but as soon as the Queen smiled at him and asked about the small Union Jack flag he was clutching, his tears disappeared. Guardsman Williams and his fellow members of the Queen's Guard had adjusted their positions to provide a protective corridor for the Queen's walkabout. They maintained their professional bearing, but Emma noticed that Guardsman Williams kept glancing toward the children with what she was beginning to recognize as genuine fondness. As the Queen moved along the barrier, stopping to accept flowers from elderly residents and chat with local dignitaries, Emma felt her excitement building to an almost unbearable level. Mrs. Patterson had positioned herself behind the group of students, and Emma could hear her teacher quietly coaching some of the more nervous children about what to say if the Queen spoke to them. "Remember, it's Your Majesty for the first address, then, ma'am, afterward," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "And boys, a small bow from the neck. Girls, a little curtsy. But, most importantly, just be yourselves. The Queen loves meeting children." Emma had rehearsed this moment so many times that she felt confident about the protocol. But as the Queen drew closer, all of her careful preparation seemed to evaporate from her mind. Her legs felt shaky, her palms were sweating despite the cool spring air, and she was fairly certain she had forgotten how to speak properly. Sophie, standing next to her, seemed to be experiencing the same thing. "I think I'm going to faint," Sophie whispered, gripping Emma's arm so tightly it almost hurt. "You can't faint," Emma whispered back urgently. "The Queen is coming. This is our moment." The Queen was now just 3 people away from their position. Emma could hear her voice clearly, warm, interested, and surprisingly familiar despite the slight distance. She was speaking with a woman who had traveled from London specifically for this visit, asking about her journey and commenting on the beautiful weather Manchester was enjoying. 2 people away. Emma's heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone around her could hear it. She fumbled for her camera, nearly dropping it in her nervousness, and tried to prepare for the perfect photograph. 1 person away. The Queen was speaking with an elderly gentleman who had served in the military. Emma could hear him telling her about his grandson, who was hoping to join the army when he finished school. The Queen listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions and making comments that clearly delighted the veteran. And then, suddenly, impossibly, the Queen was directly in front of Emma. "Good afternoon," Queen Elizabeth II said, her famous voice directed specifically at Emma. The 8-year-old felt as though the entire world had suddenly gone quiet except for those 2 simple words. Emma attempted her carefully practiced curtsy, but her knees felt like jelly and she wobbled slightly. The Queen's eyes crinkled with gentle amusement, and she steadied Emma with a brief, reassuring gesture. "What a lovely dress," the Queen commented, noting the navy blue frock with tiny white flowers. "Did you choose it especially for today?" Emma found her voice, though it came out slightly higher than usual. "Yes, Your Majesty. My grandmother sent it to me from Spain. She said I should save it for the most important day ever, and I couldn't think of anything more important than meeting you." The Queen smiled warmly. "How thoughtful of your grandmother. And what's your name, dear?" "Emma Rodriguez, Your Majesty. I'm 8 years old, and I go to Oakwood Primary School. We've been learning about you in class for weeks. Mrs. Patterson taught us that you like horses and dogs, and that you've been queen for longer than anyone else in British history." "Mrs. Patterson sounds like an excellent teacher," the Queen replied, glancing toward the teacher who was beaming with pride behind a group of students. And do you like horses and dogs as well? Emma nodded enthusiastically. I love all animals, Your Majesty. We can't have pets in our flat because it's too small, but I volunteer at the animal shelter on weekend with my mom. We help take care of dogs that don't have homes yet. The Queen's expression showed genuine interest. How wonderful. That's very kind of you to help animals in need. I'm sure they appreciate your care. As Emma basked in this incredible moment of personal conversation with the Queen, she began to relax. Her Majesty was exactly as warm and kind as she had hoped, showing genuine interest in what Emma had to say rather than simply offering the polite pleasantries that Emma had expected. Would you like to take a photograph? The Queen asked, noticing the small disposable camera clutched in Emma's hand. Emma's eyes widened with delight. Could I really, Your Majesty? I promised my dad I would take a picture to show him. He had to work today, but he was so excited for me to meet you. Of course, dear. Shall we take it together? This was beyond Emma's wildest dreams. Not only was she meeting the Queen, but they were going to take a photograph together. She fumbled with the camera, her hands shaking with excitement, and realized she had no idea how she was going to take a picture of both of them. Mrs. Patterson seemed to understand the situation and quickly stepped forward. I'd be happy to take the photograph, Your Majesty, if that would be all right. The Queen nodded graciously. That will be perfect. Emma handed her precious camera to Mrs. Patterson and moved closer to the Queen. She was acutely aware that hundreds of people were watching this interaction, but somehow it felt like the most private and special moment of her life. As Mrs. Patterson raised the camera, the Queen leaned down slightly to Emma's height. Shall we smile for your father? She asked. Emma grinned so widely that her cheeks hurt, and she heard the click of the camera capturing this incredible moment. She knew that this photograph will become the most treasured possession in her family's home. But as the photo was being taken, something unexpected began to happen behind them. The crowd, excited by the extended interaction between the Queen and the young girl, began pressing forward slightly. The movement was gentle and well-intentioned. Everyone simply wanted to get a better view of this charming scene, but it created a subtle shift in the crowd dynamics. Guardsman Williams, ever vigilant in his duty to protect the Queen, noticed the slight forward surge of the crowd. His training kicked in immediately, and he began to assess the situation. The movement wasn't dangerous, but it was his responsibility to ensure that the protective space around the Queen remained secure. Emma, completely absorbed in her magical conversation with the Queen, was unaware of the subtle changes happening around her. She was lost in the moment, storing up every detail to share with her parents later. The Queen's perfume smelled like spring flowers. Her coat was even more beautiful up close, and her smile was the kindest thing Emma had ever seen. Your Majesty, Emma said suddenly, remembering something important. I wrote you a letter. I brought it with me today. Could I give it to you? The Queen's face lit up with genuine pleasure. I will be delighted to receive your letter, Emma. I do so enjoy hearing from young people. Emma reached into her pocket for the carefully folded letter she had written the night before. In it, she had told the Queen about her family, her school, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian, and her gratitude for all the Queen had done for the country. She had spent over an hour writing it in her best handwriting, asking her father to help with the spelling of the more difficult words. As Emma pulled the letter from her pocket, she took a small step forward, eager to hand it personally to the Queen. It was a completely innocent movement, born of excitement and the desire to complete this perfect interaction. But at that exact moment, Guardsman Williams was also moving forward, responding to his assessment of the crowd situation and positioning himself to maintain the protective corridor around the Queen. His focus was entirely on the crowd dynamics and potential security concerns, his training taking precedence over everything else. The collision was completely accidental and happened so quickly that no one could have prevented it. Emma's small step forward coincided perfectly with Guardsman Williams' protective movement, and his gloved hand, extended to maintain crowd control, connected with Emma's face. The impact wasn't hard, but it was unexpected and caught Emma completely off guard. She stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt, and let out a small cry of shock. The carefully folded letter fluttered from her hand and landed on the pavement. A collective gasp, went up from the crowd. Guardsman Williams froze in horror as he realized what had happened. The Queen's expression immediately shifted to one of concern, and she stepped forward instinctively toward Emma. Mrs. Patterson rushed forward, as did several other adults who had witnessed the incident. Emma stood there for a moment, her hand pressed to her cheek where the guard's hand had made contact, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Not from physical pain, but from the shock and confusion of having her perfect moment disrupted so suddenly. The magical interaction with the Queen had taken an unexpected turn, and Emma found herself at the center of a situation that no one had anticipated. The letter she had worked so hard to write lay forgotten on the ground, as everyone's attention focused on making sure she was all right. Guardsman Williams stood perfectly still, his face pale with mortification beneath his ceremonial hat, while the Queen moved toward Emma with the immediate concern of a grandmother seeing a child in distress. The crowd watched in stunned silence, unsure of what would happen next in this unprecedented situation. Emma looked up at the faces surrounding her, her teacher, the Queen, the horrified guard, and hundreds of strangers, and realized that her perfect day had suddenly become something entirely different from what she had planned. But she had no idea yet that this unexpected turn of events would lead to something even more beautiful than her original dreams had envisioned. The silence that followed the accident seemed to stretch on forever, though it probably lasted only a few seconds. Emma stood frozen in place, her small hand pressed against her cheek, staring up at Guardsman Williams with wide, confused eyes. The tears that had begun forming didn't fall, but they trembled on the edge of her lashes like tiny crystal droplets. Guardsman Williams felt as though his entire world had collapsed in that single moment. In all his months of training, through countless hours of drill and protocol instruction, through every scenario the military had prepared him for, nothing had covered accidentally striking a child during a royal visit. His face had gone completely white beneath his ceremonial bearskin, and for a moment he seemed unable to move or speak. The Queen, however, responded with the grace and composure that had defined her decades of public service. Without hesitation, she stepped closer to Emma, her maternal instincts taking precedence over royal protocol. "Oh, my dear," the Queen said softly, her voice filled with genuine concern. "Are you hurt? Let me see." Emma looked up at the Queen, still processing what had just happened. The magical moment she had been experiencing just seconds before seemed like a dream now, replaced by confusion and the strange sensation of being at the center of something she didn't understand. "I think I'm okay, Your Majesty," Emma managed to say, though her voice was shaky. "It just surprised me. I didn't see it coming." Mrs. Patterson reached the scene at the same moment as several security personnel, but the Queen raised a gentle hand to indicate that she would handle the situation. The crowd of onlookers had pressed closer, many people straining to see what was happening, while others pulled out phones to capture what was clearly an unusual moment in royal history. Guardsman Williams finally found his voice, though it came out hoarse with emotion. "Your Majesty, I am deeply sorry. I was monitoring crowd movement and didn't see the young lady step forward. There is absolutely no excuse for my actions." The Queen glanced at him briefly, then returned her attention to Emma. "Accidents happen, Guardsman Williams. What matters now is making sure this young lady is all right." Emma noticed that everyone was looking at her with such serious expressions that she began to worry she had done something wrong. "Am I in trouble?" she asked the Queen quietly. "I'm sorry if I wasn't supposed to step forward. I just wanted to give you my letter." "Oh, sweetheart, you're not in trouble at all," the Queen assured her immediately. "You did nothing wrong. Sometimes these things just happen, and that's nobody's fault." It was then that Emma's attention was drawn to the fallen letter lying on the pavement a few feet away. The paper had unfolded slightly when it fell, and she could see her careful handwriting exposed to the Manchester breeze. The sight of her precious letter on the ground, after all the work she had put into it, finally brought the tears that had been threatening to fall. "My letter," Emma said sadly, pointing to the scattered pages. "I worked so hard on it for you, Your Majesty. I wanted to tell you about my family and ask you about your corgis and thank you for being such a good queen. But now it's all dirty and probably ruined." The queen followed Emma's gaze to the letter on the ground, and something remarkable happened. Without any regard for her expensive turquoise coat or her position as the sovereign of the United Kingdom, Queen Elizabeth II bent down and began collecting the scattered pages of Emma's letter. A collective intake of breath could be heard from the crowd. Royal photographers who had been documenting the visit immediately began capturing images of their monarch kneeling on a Manchester street to retrieve a little girl's letter. It was a moment of such genuine humanity that many onlookers felt tears spring to their own eyes. "Let's see if we can put this back together, shall we?" the Queen said as she carefully gathered the pages. "I can already see that you have beautiful handwriting, Emma. Much neater than my grandson William's was at your age." Emma watched in amazement as the Queen of England knelt beside her, smoothing out the wrinkles in the letter and arranging the pages in the correct order. When the Queen handed the reconstructed letter back to her, Emma noticed that there was a small smudge of dirt on Her Majesty's glove from where she had touched the pavement. "Your Majesty, you didn't have to do that," Emma said, accepting the letter with reverent care. "You got your gloves dirty because of me." The Queen smiled, and in that smile Emma saw something that transcended all the formality and protocol of the royal visit. "Emma, do you know what I think is the most important part of being a queen?" Emma shook her head, still overwhelmed by everything that had happened. "It's remembering that we're all human beings first, and that kindness is the most royal quality anyone can possess. A little dirt on my gloves is nothing compared to making sure a thoughtful young lady doesn't lose something that obviously means so much to her." Guardsman Williams, who had been watching this extraordinary scene unfold, felt his respect for the Queen deepen even further. In his training, he had learned about the Queen's sense of duty and her dedication to service, but witnessing her immediate, instinctive compassion toward a child was something entirely different. Emma looked at the letter in her hands, then back at the Queen, then over at Guardsman Williams, who still looked absolutely miserable about what had happened. Her 8-year-old mind was processing the situation with remarkable clarity, and she was beginning to understand that this accident wasn't anyone's fault. It was just one of those things that sometimes happen when lots of people are in the same place trying to do their best. "Guardsman Williams," Emma said suddenly, turning to address the young soldier directly, "you don't need to feel bad. You were just doing your job to keep the Queen safe. That's very important. I know you didn't mean to bump into me." The guard looked down at this remarkable little girl who was offering him forgiveness for something that had mortified him completely. "Thank you, Miss Emma. That is very kind of you to say. But I'm still deeply sorry that I spoiled your special moment with Her Majesty." Emma considered this for a moment, looking around at the crowd of people watching them, at Mrs. Patterson, who was beaming with pride at her student's maturity, at the Queen, who was listening to this exchange with obvious interest, and, finally, back at Guardsman Williams. "But you didn't spoil it," Emma said with the simple wisdom that only children seem to possess. "You made it different, but different isn't always bad. Now, instead of just meeting the Queen, I have a story that nobody else in my class will ever have. And I learned that the Queen is even more wonderful than I thought, because she picked up my letter from the ground, even though she's wearing such a beautiful coat." The Queen's face broke into a radiant smile. "Emma, you're quite right. Some of the most memorable experiences come from the unexpected moments, don't they? And speaking of your letter, I would still very much like to read it, if you're willing to share it with me." Emma's face lit up with renewed excitement. "Really? Even though it got a little dirty when it fell?" "Especially because it got a little dirty. That just means it has a story to tell, just like we do." With ceremonial care, Emma handed her letter to the Queen. As Her Majesty unfolded the pages and began to scan Emma's neat handwriting, her expression softened further. The letter was exactly what one might expect from a thoughtful 8-year-old, full of enthusiasm, genuine curiosity, and heartfelt gratitude. "This is absolutely lovely, Emma," the Queen said after reading through the pages. "I'm particularly touched by your question about whether being Queen ever gets lonely, and by your offer to write to me whenever I might need a friend. That shows remarkable thoughtfulness for someone your age." Emma blushed with pleasure. "My mom says that everyone needs friends, even queens. And my dad says that when you care about someone, you should tell them, because you never know when you might get another chance." Your parents sound very wise, the Queen replied. And I want you to know that I will treasure this letter. I plan to add it to my personal collection of correspondence from young people. Some of my most cherished letters have come from children, because children have a way of seeing the world that reminds us adults of what's truly important. Mrs. Patterson, who had been watching this entire exchange with growing amazement, stepped forward slightly. Your Majesty, if I may say so, Emma has been the most excited student in our school about your visit. She's been counting down the days for weeks. I can see why, the Queen said, glancing back at Emma. She's clearly a very special young lady. Tell me, Emma, what would you like to be when you grow up? Emma's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. I want to be a veterinarian, Your Majesty. I want to help sick animals get better, especially dogs and cats that don't have families to take care of them. My mom takes me to volunteer at the animal shelter, and I love it when we can find homes for the animals that have been waiting a long time. How wonderful, the Queen responded warmly. I think you'll make an excellent veterinarian. You clearly have the compassion and dedication that animals need. And who knows, perhaps someday you might even help take care of some royal corgis. The suggestion that she might someday work with the Queen's famous dogs made Emma's imagination soar. That would be the most amazing job in the whole world, Your Majesty. Do you think your corgis would like me? I think they would love you, Emma. They're excellent judges of character, and they can always tell when someone has a kind heart. Guardsman Williams, who had been listening to this conversation while maintaining his professional posture, found himself thinking about how this little girl's grace and forgiveness had turned what could have been his most embarrassing moment into something approaching beautiful. Her ability to see past the accident to the intentions behind it was humbling. The Queen seemed to notice his continued distress and turned to address him directly. Guardsman Williams, I want you to know that your quick response to assess crowd safety was exactly what your training prepared you for. The fact that an accident occurred doesn't diminish your dedication to duty. Sometimes the most conscientious service can lead to unexpected outcomes, and that doesn't reflect poorly on the person serving. Thank you, Your Majesty, Guardsman Williams replied, his voice thick with gratitude. Your understanding means everything to me. Emma looked between the Queen and the Guardsman, and, suddenly, had an idea that seemed to spring from the generous spirit that had already impressed everyone who had witnessed her behavior. Your Majesty, Emma said carefully, would it be okay if I asked Guardsman Williams a question? The Queen nodded encouragingly, and Emma turned to face the young soldier directly. Guardsman Williams, would you like to be in a picture with me and the Queen? I mean, if that's allowed? Because this whole thing happened to both of us, and I think my dad would like to meet you too, to say thank you for protecting the Queen so well. The suggestion surprised everyone, including Guardsman Williams himself. For a child to suggest, including the person who had accidentally struck her in a commemorative photograph, showed a level of emotional maturity that left the adults around her speechless. The Queen looked at Emma with obvious admiration. Emma, that is one of the most thoughtful suggestions I've heard in a very long time. Guardsman Williams, would you be willing to join us for a photograph? The young guardsman looked overwhelmed by the unexpected turn the situation had taken. Your Majesty, Miss Emma, I would be deeply honored, though I'm not sure I deserve such kindness. Everyone deserves kindness, Emma said simply. That's what my grandmother always tells me. And besides, now we're all part of the same story, so we should all be in the same picture. As arrangements were made for this unprecedented photograph, Emma realized that her day had become something far more special than she could have ever imagined when she woke up that morning. What had started as a dream of simply seeing the Queen had transformed into a lesson about grace, forgiveness, and the unexpected ways that ordinary people could create extraordinary moments together. The request for a three-way photograph created a small stir among the Queen's security detail and royal staff. This was certainly not a standard protocol situation, and several officials exchanged uncertain glances as they tried to determine the appropriate response. Royal visits were typically choreographed down to the minute, with every interaction carefully planned and timed. But the Queen's private secretary, who had been observing the entire incident from a respectful distance, recognized something special in what was unfolding. He had worked with the monarch for over a decade, and had learned to read her expressions with remarkable accuracy. This was not a moment for rigid adherence to protocol. This was a moment for the human side of royalty to shine through. Mrs. Patterson, still clutching Emma's small camera, looked uncertain about her role in this unprecedented situation. Your Majesty, would you prefer that one of your official photographers capture this moment instead of our simple school camera? The Queen considered this briefly, then shook her head with a warm smile. I think Emma's camera is perfect for this particular photograph. After all, this is her story, and she should have it documented exactly as she chooses. Emma felt a surge of gratitude toward the Queen for understanding how important it was to her to use her own camera, the one her parents had given her specifically for this day, with instructions to capture every precious moment. The photograph taken with this camera would sit on their mantelpiece at home, becoming a centerpiece of family pride for years to come. Guardsman Williams, meanwhile, was grappling with emotions he had never expected to experience during his service. The little girl's immediate forgiveness and her generous invitation to be included in what should have been her special moment with the Queen had left him feeling humbled and deeply moved. In his military training, he had learned about honor, duty, and service, but Emma was teaching him something about grace that no textbook could have conveyed. "Miss Emma," he said quietly, "before we take this photograph, I want you to know that your kindness today has meant more to me than I can properly express. You have shown more maturity and generosity in these few minutes than many adults display in a lifetime." Emma looked up at him with her clear, innocent eyes. "You don't have to thank me, Guardsman Williams. We're friends now, aren't we? Friends help each other feel better when accidents happen." The simplicity and sincerity of her response moved several people in the crowd to tears. Here was a child who had experienced a startling and potentially upsetting incident during what was supposed to be the most exciting day of her young life, and instead of dwelling on the negative aspects, she was focusing on building connections and spreading kindness. The Queen watched this exchange with the keen observation skills that had served her well throughout decades of public service. She had met thousands of children during her reign, but rarely had she encountered one who demonstrated such natural emotional intelligence and resilience. Emma was special, and the Queen wanted to ensure that this moment was honored appropriately. "Before we take our photograph," the Queen said, "I'd like to make sure that Emma's classmates have a chance to meet me as well. After all, this is a school visit, and everyone should have the opportunity to participate." Mrs. Patterson's face lit up with gratitude. "Your Majesty, that would be absolutely wonderful. The children have been preparing for weeks, and they would be thrilled beyond words." Emma immediately brightened at this suggestion. "Oh yes, Your Majesty. You have to meet Sophie. She's my best friend, and she helped me practice my curtsy. And Tommy has been learning about the Tower of London because he heard you keep your jewels there. And Sarah brought flowers from her grandmother's garden especially for you." The Queen's decision to extend her interaction with the school group created a ripple of excitement that spread through the crowd. What had begun as a standard royal walkabout was evolving into something much more personal and meaningful, largely due to the unexpected incident that had brought such grace and humanity to the surface. As the Queen moved along the barrier to greet Emma's classmates, Guardsman Williams found himself in the unusual position of being directly involved in the royal interaction rather than simply providing security from a distance. Emma had somehow managed to make him part of the story, and he wasn't quite sure how to navigate this new territory. Sophie, Emma's best friend, was so overwhelmed when the Queen stopped to speak with her that she forgot every word of the careful greeting she had rehearsed. Instead, she blurted out, "Your Majesty, Emma has been talking about meeting you for so long that she's been practicing her curtsy in the school bathroom." The Queen laughed delightedly at this revelation, while Emma turned bright red with embarrassment. "Sophie," she whispered urgently, but the Queen was clearly charmed by this glimpse into Emma's preparations. "I think that shows wonderful dedication," the Queen told Emma, "and I'm sure all that practice helped you execute such a lovely curtsy earlier, despite the unexpected circumstances." Tommy, the boy who had been studying the Tower of London, managed to overcome his nervousness enough to ask, "Your Majesty, is it true that the ravens at the Tower of London can really predict the future of England?" Well, the queen replied thoughtfully, the ravens are certainly excellent judges of character. They've been watching over the tower for centuries, and they've seen many changes in our country. Whether they can predict the future, I'm not certain, but I do know they're very good at recognizing people with kind hearts. Sarah, who had brought flowers from her grandmother's garden, shyly offered her small bouquet to the queen. These are from my Nan's garden, Your Majesty. She said you might like them because they're British flowers, not fancy foreign ones. The queen accepted the simple bouquet with obvious pleasure. They're absolutely beautiful, Sarah. Please give my thanks to your grandmother. Some of the most beautiful gifts are the ones that come from the heart and the garden. As the queen continued meeting Emma's classmates, each interaction was marked by the same genuine interest and warmth that had characterized her conversation with Emma. But there was something different about this particular royal visit, an authenticity and spontaneity that had emerged from the unexpected incident and Emma's remarkable response to it. Guardsman Williams observed these interactions while maintaining his protective stance, and he began to understand something profound about both the queen and the little girl who had forgiven him so readily. They shared a quality that transcended their vastly different stations in life, an ability to connect with people on a fundamentally human level, to see past circumstances and protocols to the person beneath. When the queen had finished meeting all of Emma's classmates, she returned to where Emma was waiting patiently. Now, then, the queen said, shall we have that photograph? I believe 3 friends should definitely have their picture taken together. The word friends sent a thrill through Emma that was even greater than the excitement she had felt about meeting the queen. To think that the Queen of England considered her a friend was almost too wonderful to believe. Mrs. Patterson raised the camera, and the 3 unlikely companions arranged themselves for the photograph. The queen stood in the center with Emma on her right side and Guardsman Williams on her left. Emma reached up to take the queen's hand, and after a moment's hesitation, the queen gestured for Guardsman Williams to step closer as well. This is for Emma's father who couldn't be here today, the queen said to Guardsman Williams, and for anyone else who wants to remember that sometimes the most beautiful moments come from unexpected places. As Mrs. Patterson prepared to take the photograph, Emma had a sudden thought. Wait, she said, could we take 2 pictures? One serious, one like the official royal photographs, and one where we're all smiling really big, because I want to remember how happy this made me feel. The queen looked down at Emma with obvious affection. I think that's an excellent idea. A serious royal photograph and a happy friend's photograph. We should always document our joy as well as our dignity. The first photograph was taken with appropriate royal solemnity. The queen with her characteristic composed expression, Guardsman Williams at attention, and Emma attempting to look as dignified as possible while still glowing with excitement. For the second photograph, all 3 of them broke into genuine smiles. The queen's expression was one of pure delight. Guardsman Williams looked relieved and grateful, and Emma beamed with the joy of a child whose wildest dreams had not only come true but had exceeded her imagination in every possible way. As the camera clicked, capturing this moment of shared happiness, Emma realized that what had happened today was better than any scenario she had ever imagined. She had not only met the queen, but she had learned something important about kindness, forgiveness, and the way that ordinary people could create extraordinary moments when they chose to respond to unexpected situations with grace and compassion. The crowd that had witnessed this entire sequence of events burst into spontaneous applause. Many people were wiping tears from their eyes, moved by what they had seen unfold between a monarch, a guardsman, and a little girl who had somehow managed to transform an awkward accident into a lesson about the best qualities of human nature. As the applause continued, the queen looked around at the faces in the crowd, and then back at Emma. You know, my dear, she said quietly, I've been doing royal visits for many decades, and I want you to know that this has been one of the most memorable and meaningful encounters I've ever had. You've reminded me today why I love meeting young people so much. You see the world with such hope and kindness. Emma felt tears of joy spring to her eyes. Your Majesty, this has been the best day of my entire life. Not just because I got to meet you, but because I learned that even when things don't go exactly as planned, they can still turn out wonderfully if everyone tries to be kind to each other. Guardsman Williams, listening to this exchange, knew that he would carry this lesson with him for the rest of his military career and beyond. A small girl had shown him that grace under pressure wasn't just about maintaining composure in difficult situations. It was about choosing compassion over blame, understanding over anger, and connection over separation. As the royal visit continued and the Queen moved on to other scheduled appointments, Emma clutched her camera and her letter, both now infinitely more precious because of the story they represented. She had set out that morning hoping to catch a glimpse of the Queen, and instead she had gained a friend, learned a valuable lesson about forgiveness, and created a memory that would inspire her for the rest of her life. The incident that could have been embarrassing or upsetting had instead become a testament to the power of choosing kindness in unexpected moments. Emma had shown that sometimes the most important thing about an accident isn't what caused it, but how people choose to respond to it together. 3 weeks later, Emma Rodriguez sat at her family's small kitchen table, carefully placing the developed photographs from her royal encounter into a special scrapbook her mother had bought specifically for this purpose. The pictures had finally come back from the photo shop, and Emma had spent the entire afternoon arranging and rearranging them to tell the story of her extraordinary day. The 2 photographs with the Queen and Guardsman Williams held the place of honor on the first page. In the formal photograph, Emma looked serious and dignified, standing proudly next to the Queen with Guardsman Williams in his impressive uniform beside them. But it was the second photograph that truly captured the magic of that day. All 3 of them beaming with genuine happiness, their faces radiating the joy of an unexpected friendship formed in the most unlikely circumstances. Carlos Rodriguez had requested time off from his factory shift specifically to be home when the photographs arrived. As he studied the images of his daughter with the Queen of England, his eyes filled with tears of pride and gratitude. This was what he had dreamed of when he brought his family to England. Opportunities for Emma that would have been impossible in their small village in Mexico. Mija, he said softly, using the Spanish endearment he had called Emma since she was a baby. Tell me again about what happened. I want to hear every detail. Emma had already told the story dozens of times to family members, neighbors, and classmates, but she never tired of reliving those magical moments. Each telling seemed to reveal new details and deeper meanings that she hadn't fully appreciated at the time. Well, Papa, Emma began, settling in her favorite storytelling position with her legs crossed beneath her. When Guardsman Williams accidentally bumped into me, I was scared at first because everything happened so fast. But then I saw how sorry he looked, and I remembered what you always tell me about how good people sometimes make mistakes. Carlos nodded encouragingly. Emma had always been a thoughtful child, but the wisdom she had displayed during her encounter with the Queen had surprised even him. And then the Queen picked up my letter from the ground, even though it was dirty, and she was wearing such a beautiful coat. That's when I knew that she really was as kind as everyone says. She didn't care about getting her gloves dirty if it meant making me feel better. Maria Rodriguez, Emma's mother, was listening from the kitchen where she was preparing dinner. She had heard this story many times as well, but it never failed to fill her with amazement at her daughter's maturity and the extraordinary kindness that both the Queen and the Guardsman had shown. What I still can't believe, Maria called from the kitchen, is that you invited the Guardsman to be in the photograph with you and the Queen. Where did that idea come from, mi amor? Emma considered this question seriously. I think it came from remembering what you and Papa taught me about treating people the way I would want to be treated. Guardsman Williams felt so bad about what happened, but it wasn't really his fault. He was just doing his job to protect the Queen. I thought maybe if we were all in the picture together, it would help him remember the good parts of that day instead of just the accident. The wisdom in Emma's response never failed to humble her parents. At 8 years old, their daughter had demonstrated an understanding of empathy and forgiveness that many adults struggled to achieve. But the story didn't end with that remarkable day in Manchester. 2 days after the royal visit, something completely unexpected had arrived in the Rodriguez family's mailbox. An envelope bearing the royal coat of arms and addressed to Miss Emma Rodriguez in elegant handwriting. Emma had stared at the envelope in disbelief before carefully opening it with the reverence reserved for the most precious of treasures. Inside was a personal note from Queen Elizabeth II, written on official royal stationery, thanking Emma for her letter and her kindness during their meeting. The Queen's note read, "Dear Emma, I wanted to write to thank you for your wonderful letter and for your extraordinary grace during our meeting in Manchester. Your kindness toward Guardsman Williams and your mature response to an unexpected situation reminded me why encounters with young people are among the most rewarding aspects of my royal duties. You represent the very best of your generation, and I am confident that you will achieve great things in your goal to become a veterinarian. Please give my best regards to your parents, who have clearly raised a remarkable young lady. With warmest wishes, Elizabeth R." Emma had read the letter so many times that she could recite it by heart, but she still got the same thrill every time she saw the Queen's signature. The letter now held a place of honor in a frame on Emma's bedroom wall, where she could see it every morning when she woke up and every evening before she went to sleep. But perhaps even more surprising than the Queen's letter was what had arrived the following week. Another envelope, this one addressed from the Ministry of Defense and containing a letter from Guardsman Williams himself. The young soldier had written to express his continued gratitude for Emma's kindness and to tell her how much her forgiveness had meant to him. He shared that he had been so affected by her grace that he had requested permission to volunteer with a local youth organization that worked with children from disadvantaged backgrounds, inspired by Emma's example of how young people could make a positive impact on the world. In his letter, Guardsman Williams had also included a small pin featuring the insignia of the Queen's Guard, along with a note explaining that it had been specially approved by his commanding officer as a token of appreciation for Emma's exceptional character. Emma now wore the pin proudly on her school uniform, and her classmates never tired of hearing the story behind it. The impact of Emma's story had spread far beyond her immediate family and school. Mrs. Patterson had written a detailed account of the incident for the school newsletter, and the story had been picked up by local newspapers and eventually by national media outlets. Emma's photograph with the Queen and Guardsman Williams had appeared in publications across the United Kingdom, always accompanied by stories that emphasized her remarkable maturity and the positive way she had handled an unexpected situation. The attention had been overwhelming at times, but Emma's parents had been careful to help her understand that the real importance of what had happened wasn't the fame or recognition, but the lesson about choosing kindness in difficult moments. They wanted Emma to remain the same thoughtful, generous child she had always been, not to become caught up in the temporary celebrity that had resulted from her actions. Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had used the incident as the basis for several classroom discussions about empathy, forgiveness, and the importance of responding to accidents with understanding rather than anger. Emma's classmates had been fascinated by the detailed account of what had really happened during those remarkable minutes with the Queen, and many of them had been inspired to write their own letters to various members of the royal family. The animal shelter where Emma volunteered with her mother had also been touched by her story. When word spread about her goal to become a veterinarian and her volunteer work with homeless animals, several local veterinarians had reached out to offer Emma opportunities to learn more about animal care. One veterinary clinic had even invited her to visit and observe some basic procedures, supervised by professionals who were impressed by her dedication at such a young age. But perhaps the most meaningful outcome of Emma's royal encounter was the way it had strengthened her family's sense of belonging in England. Carlos had sometimes worried that his daughter would feel like an outsider because of their immigrant status, but Emma's acceptance by the Queen herself had given the entire family a sense of being truly welcomed into British society. You know what I think is the most important part of this whole story? Emma said to her parents as she finished arranging the photographs in her scrapbook. It's that everyone was trying to do the right thing. The Queen was trying to be kind to all the children who came to see her. Guardsman Williams was trying to keep everyone safe. I was trying to be respectful and polite. And when something unexpected happened, we all kept trying to do the right thing. Maria sat down next to her daughter and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. That's exactly right, mi amor. And that's the lesson I want you to remember from this experience. Not the excitement of meeting the Queen, though that was wonderful, but the importance of choosing kindness even when things don't go as planned. Carlos joined his wife and daughter at the table, looking at the photographs that documented his daughter's extraordinary day. Emma, do you know what makes me most proud about this story? Emma shook her head, curious about her father's perspective. It's not that you met the Queen of England, though that's amazing. It's that when you had a choice between being upset about an accident or being understanding about it, you chose understanding. When you could have been angry or embarrassed, you chose to be kind instead. That tells me that your mother and I are raising someone who will make the world a better place. Emma hugged both of her parents tightly. I learned that from watching both of you. You always tell me that how we treat other people is more important than what other people can do for us. And you show me every day how to be kind to people, even when it's hard. As the family sat together looking at the photographs and remembering the details of that remarkable day, Emma realized that the story wasn't really about meeting the Queen or having an unusual encounter with a royal guard. It was about the power of choosing compassion over blame, understanding over anger, and connection over separation. The letter from the Queen now served as a daily reminder to Emma that kindness was noticed and appreciated even by the most important people in the world. The pin from Guardsman Williams reminded her that forgiveness could transform embarrassing moments into opportunities for friendship. And the photographs captured forever the proof that extraordinary things could happen when ordinary people chose to respond to unexpected situations with grace and generosity. Years later, when Emma did indeed become a veterinarian as she had dreamed, she would often tell the story of her royal encounter to young clients and their families, using it to illustrate the importance of staying calm and kind even when things don't go according to plan. The lesson that a small accident could become a beautiful memory if everyone involved chose to respond with understanding rather than blame became one of the guiding principles of her life. But on that quiet evening 3 weeks after the most extraordinary day of her young life, Emma was simply a happy 8-year-old girl surrounded by her loving family, treasuring the photographs that prove that sometimes the most wonderful stories begin with the smallest accidents, and that the most important quality anyone can possess is the ability to choose kindness, especially in unexpected moments. The royal encounter had ended, but the lessons it taught and the memories it created would last a lifetime, inspiring not just Emma, but everyone who heard her story to remember that grace, forgiveness, and human connection are the most royal qualities of all.